Welcome back to The Night Shift, your safe space for talking about UFOs, NHI, UAPs, disclosure, psionics, and everything else your friends, family, and coworkers are so sick and tired of hearing you go on and on about. It's heating up, guys. It's getting so crazy. It's getting so crazy right now. We've got a great show. I hope we have a great show for you today. I think we have a great show for you tonight. Xander's back with us. For one, Xander, welcome back. How you feeling?
Yo, it's good to be back. Great to be back. And yes, things are getting weird. Very weird.
It's so weird. It's so weird. We're going to be talking about a few things today. We were going to do a completely different show. Initially, I had a different idea for what I wanted to talk about today. And then Pavl, God bless him. Guys, if you're not listening to Psychoactivo podcast, if you're not watching it, if you're not subscribed to Pavl's channel, you got to go there. You got to go there. Pavl sends me a text the other day. And he goes, well, he said, no, yesterday. This was a few hours ago. I get a text from him on WhatsApp. He goes, watch this. You're going to want to take the day off. And I was like, okay. And it was the link to the full Ross Coulthart, Jake Barber interview. And I spent all this morning listening to it, and it's melted my brain. And I was like texting back and forth with him and Xander, and we were all kind of talking about it, and I'm sending it to other people. I'm like, have you guys seen this? This is it. It's insane. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Bledsoe Said So podcast, where Chris Bledsoe was a recent guest. Chris Bledsoe, of course, one of the most famous experiencers in all of ufology, one of the most well-known and still alive and still active and amazing stories. And he's just going to blow your mind with some of the things that he had to say. And we're going to talk about the Age of Disclosure, the trailer for the new Shot in Secret documentary that is going to premiere, I think, South by Southwest. And it's just going to be a great show. So thanks for being here. Welcome. It's good to be back with you all. Pavl's actually going to drop in at some point. He told me he would be joining us in a little bit. So we'll see. Maybe he likes to wait until about the first 30 minutes to swing on by. So we'll say hi when he comes in. Just a couple channel updates real fast. We blew past 21,000 subscribers. We're sitting at 21,131 right now. So go team. Yay us. Great job, everyone. And quick shout out to some of our new members, Jordan, BB, Brad, Angelo, Jordan T, Punkabilly, Dale Phillips, California Travel Videos, K-Roast, DCC, Thumper, Butch Kenny, Legend. Welcome aboard. It's great to have all of you. Thank you so much for being members. All right. With that out of the way, shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to all of our mods and the mod squad. Welcome aboard, everyone. It's going to be a fun show. So I don't know where to start, Xander. I know you can't. You can't talk much because your voice is strained. So I want to.
I've got like 500 words, and then my voice will go, and then that'll be it for the night. I'll be I'll be holding up signs the rest of the of the night. But you've just finished. Well, you're very close to finishing the Barber interview, so it's so fresh in your mind. Obviously everyone was a little bit let down. You could say let down by the. I guess you could say how overproduced the original interview was that was aired last week. It was just here, there, and everywhere, wasn't it? There was no narrative that you could really catch on to. Whereas this, I watched it this morning. I agree. I feel as it's the interview that should have been aired first time around. I fully understand why they couldn't just drop 3.5 hours of just uninterrupted, out there stuff. So I get that they had to do what they did, but what are your initial thoughts? You're like, I think you said you're like 15 minutes from the end, so you've pretty much seen it all at this point.
I'm at the best part. This thing, it plays like a movie. There's just something you said, and I was thinking about that this morning. I'm at the gym and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, this is like a movie. This is the movie. Who would be in this movie? I was trying to like cast it in my head. I think I know who'd play Jake Barber.
That's got to be Matt Damon.
I was going to go Peter Weller, but I'm older than you.
Matt Damon from Elysium looks quite a lot like Jake
Matt
Barber.
Damon does. He would do it. He was going to play Bob Lazar, though.
Yeah, he was. Conflict of interest.
I think this is the interview. This one, what's that movie? Margin Call.
Right, yeah.
He's like, I'm telling you, this is it. This is the one. I feel like this filled in so many missing pieces of the puzzle. Jake Barber, what you said summed it up perfectly. The first interview was like watching 30 minutes of a film without the rest of it, just random bits and pieces, and they cut out like an hour. And you're trying to figure out what you were missing, but it just doesn't make sense. This was like the full movie all the way through. And I couldn't believe how much confusion he clears up by the end. And how positive he is at the end of this talk about what's coming next. I don't know where to dig in because it's almost too much.
Everything he's saying, in my opinion, it's really lining up with what my preconceived notions about all of this were. I think at this point, given that we've focused already quite heavily on stuff that is beyond, let's call it meta science at this point, it's still in the realms of the woo-woo, but 2025 has so far, it's been a bit weird with the whole psionics thing, telepathy, spiritual enlightenment and things like that. I think that's it from now on. I think if you're going to be part of this sort of exploration for this year, that's kind of like a thing you've got to accept, is that these real stern tier 1 operators from within the military, they are all still saying yes. They are like accessing your emotions and you're controlling craft with your mind and things like that. So maybe at this point, that's just the fact to accept. If you can't get past anything else, get past that for the time being, and then we'll slowly unlock everything else after that.
The timing is so strange. It's like if all of these things are happening at the same time, they all seem to be like dovetailing off of one another. It seems like we're in this, we're just in this moment now where the wheels have left the ground and we're kind of like just above the runway, and you can feel like we've just taken off. And I got the sense by the time I got to the last 15 minutes of the Jake Barber interview that not only is disclosure we're already in it. This is it. We're watching it happen. It's going to get crazier, and it's in the best possible way. And if what he's saying is legit, and I don't doubt him. I mean, I guess I'll just start with my expanded understanding of Jake Barber after watching him for the full interview and listening to him in detail and really just paying attention to what he was trying to say. My impression now is that this man is extremely intelligent. He's super, super smart. He's one of those people that you can see it in his eyes. Like, this guy is just sharp. And every step of the way, the whole story that he's telling has so much detail to it. It's just amazing. He seems to genuinely, truly be one of the good guys. It's starting to make more sense to me what is going on, who this faction is that is pro-disclosure, that's trying to make it happen. And he goes into a really nice description of what exactly that is from within, from the inside, what that looks like. And he confirmed a bunch of stuff along the way. Ross Coulthart did an exemplary job. It was just outstanding to watch him. The questions that he asked and his follow-ups were so good. I just can't think of like if you've gotten this far. Go ahead.
I guess if we have because I wasn't here last week, I was in the realms of delirium.
You were in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, I was fully up to date. Like, I was watching this stream and screaming because at my phone because I wanted to contribute so bad. But yeah, if you'd allow me a couple of minutes to just get the whole Greer thing out the way.
Yes.
Because,
Please.
you know, everyone knows I've been Team Greer this whole time. There's a section within the Jake Barber interview that just, he basically shares the reality of the situation. So I'll play that and then we can discuss it afterwards.
In the course of your high-value target investigation, you met Dr. Stephen Greer.
Yeah, I did.
What was the purpose of meeting Dr. Stephen Greer?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that, you can say what you want about Dr. Greer, but the guy's been 30 years ahead of everyone else on a lot of the details of this subject.
So a lot of what he says is correct.
To me, he's like the Bentwaters. Like, we had everything we needed in 1980, and now we're fishing around for morsels of that. This guy, he's been ahead of everyone. And what I find quite funny is the one thing he gets the most shit for is the one thing he's probably most right about, and that is his CE5 protocol.
So CE5 is when he uses meditation and he claims it engages telepathically with the phenomenon.
Yeah, that's his term for it. Like, we don't use CE5. We don't use Dr. Greer's protocol. No to other people in the program or subsequent programs.
So CE5 is real.
Yeah, if we're going to use his term, I'll tell you what is real is the ability to go into something like a meditative state and summon UAP and pilot UAP. That is real. That's 100% real.
Wow. I have to process that for a moment because that is just the most extraordinary claim.
Yeah. Well, we hope to prove it soon.
That's not even the tip of the iceberg, and it's so good.
Let me just do one thing. If I had 4 words left, Daddy Greer was right.
Oh my God. You've been waiting to say that.
Oh, honestly, like a week. Look, obviously this hasn't happened in the same way that Greer said it would, nor has he really been the centre of, judging on this interview, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but judging on this interview, he's clearly not been central to this. He's used phrases such as, like, they've gone to ground, they're only talking with me now. That was obviously never the case. And, he could have been a bit more upfront about the fact that this News Nation interview was going to take place and that his version of the information coming forwards wasn't the way it was going to happen, because he must have known that over a month ago at this point. But he never said at any point that this wasn't going to be his version of the disclosure until we literally got the announcement that the interview was a week away. So, Greer, full of flaws, but Jake hits the nail on the head in this interview. He's been around for 30 years, and so much of everything he's said has been proven to be corroborated by so many people. And yes, it's cool to make fun of, like, how often he debriefs people. It is funny, and I think people should be able to make fun of themselves in the same way, and it'd be good for Greer to have some humility and do exactly the same. But the core of what he's getting at seems to be legitimate, and I think his name has been dragged through the mud so badly, and not all for bad reason. But at this point, we need to continue to listen to what he says. I think that's my conclusion of all of this. I think he could communicate far better, but basically, I think what he's saying is legit at this point. I don't know if you have any differing thoughts at this point.
I don't. I would just say this regarding Greer. I've always said I am hard on Greer, and I do have questions, and I think that's healthy. I think that should be true of all of us. We should all really be asking questions all the time about everybody. And Jake Barber's no exception to that. But with Greer, I've always said he was out front on this 30 years ago. This is the guy who paved the way for all of us to be where we are right now. He is the one who got me roped into this whole subject in a major way. And I think at bottom, the thing that is most significant about what we're learning now is how fundamental consciousness is to the entire phenomenon, and how that is going to be the fulcrum on which everything turns going forward. And Greer did call that. He called that early.
But that's not to say he's got to be center stage going forwards by any means. I think there are people, like we'll get into Bledsoe. Jake Barber's obviously got a team of psionics that he's working with.
Holy shit.
Yeah, how mad is that?
By the way, today's episode is brought to you by Ingo Swan's ESP for everybody's natural guide to ESP. So if you want to learn how to do this stuff, take it from the Michael Jordan of remote viewing. Everybody's guide to natural ESP. Sorry, Xander, that's sitting here on the desk. Not that he's got to be center stage going forward. I don't think he should be, but clearly he has facilitated some of this story. By all accounts, Barber contacted Greer before anybody else, purely because Barber was still working at recovering these hard drives. That story is a whole other thing that's so crazy. Do you want to tell that story so people know?
I wish I had it lined up, but either way, it's quite a long story to quite a long clip to show, so it's probably a good thing that we don't show it. But we can get into Herrera and show a clip of Herrera shortly.
Well, to your point about the Greer thing, more or less, one of the other things that stood out to me about this interview was how he comes into contact with Greer was so interesting. And it is a long story, but to shorten it up a lot and really just give people the Cliff's Notes, Jake Barber's private mercenary team of expendables, more or less. Like, that's the part that's like a movie. It's literally like the A-team. If you have a problem and no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-team. He was the A-team. They're looking for these hard drives that contain sensitive data that I guess shouldn't be leaked, and they're trying to figure out where it's going to go. And so they preemptively seek out Dr. Greer and go to him and say, look, someone may come to you with some hard drives or some information that we are waiting for, and we're trying to intercept that. In exchange for your help if that happens, we will come on board with you and help vet your whistleblowers to make sure that the people that are coming to you are legit. And it's like a one hand washes the other kind of a thing. That's like the bare bones version of the story. And so they make an agreement to work together. And in that capacity, he gets to know Dr. Greer. And then I guess Dr. Greer impresses the shit out of Jake Barber, which was kind of, I guess it shouldn't be surprising considering the history of Stephen Greer and what he's done. But it surprised me the way that he said it, because the whole first half of this interview is how badass Jake Barber is. So then when he goes to Stephen Greer and he's like, oh, this guy's legit. That in a weird way kind of like took me aback a little bit, because it was just, I didn't expect it. But he said, yeah, this guy's for real. And then everything from that point on gets into the psionics. For the next hour, it's really about psionics. Mm. And I think that's going to be the official word of 2025. That's it. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's the Greer thing for me. It blew my mind.
Did you want to, because he talks about Michael Herrera, obviously in the same vein, he met Greer, I think it was during the 2023 disclosure project at the National
where
Press
Herrera
Club,
spoke. Yeah,
where Herrera spoke, and that's where Jake Barber first met him. And obviously, given that Herrera talked about this octagonal shaped UAP, and that was the one that changed his life. He chimed straight up and requested with Greer that he could meet with Michael Herrera. So I've got that video to play.
So real quick, just to expand on that a little bit, the craft that you're describing is the same 8. He calls it the 8 gon.
That's the one.
It's the same one that Herrera saw. And when Jake Barber, for context, when he realizes he's working for Greer and he realizes what Michael Herrera is talking about, it clicks for him. And then he's like, oh my God, I can fill in the blanks on this story. I can explain some of the missing pieces. It's not what you guys think it is. And what it turns out to be is insane. So anyway, let's jump into it.
Yeah, I think I have the right place. Let's check.
We're going on. And I saw this young guy get up there, and it just spoke to me. Call it my intuition that was blessed. I was blessed with that night. I made contact with non-human intelligence for the first time, but my intuition was on high alert that night. And when he spoke, I knew what he was saying was true, and no one else was believing him. And he was wrong about a few key things that he was speculating on. And so I made the decision after he spoke to go to Dr. Greer and ask to speak with him privately.
So let me summarize very quickly what Michael Herrera alleged. He was on a relief mission in Sumatra, Indonesia. They were deployed, he and his small patrol, to a particular area, and they were helping find people who needed help.
Yeah.
In the course of that patrol, they were carrying weapons. That's something that's been vigorously disputed by some of his colleagues, but he's adamant that he was carrying weapons. And they stumbled across a craft, a gigantic craft.
Yeah.
Many meters wide, hovering in the air. And below that craft, there was a platform with trucks, Ford 150s, and there were containers that he described. That pushed buttons with you, what he described, didn't he? He told the Greer disclosure conference, which was in 2023, that the paramilitaries pointed their weapons and threatened to kill the Marines, that they were American, they took their guns off them, and they basically threatened that they were going to be killed.
Yeah. That's exactly what he talked about.
Basically, they were told, eventually they were released, they were told to walk away. Their weapons were unchambered, there were no rounds in the weapons, and they were told to walk away. They allowed them to leave, but they were told not to look back.
Yeah, I can't speak to all that. And let me be clear, that is not the type of group I would ever volunteer to be a part of, but I know that there are guys like that out there that get shopped out and become part of these programs. The particular part that struck me were two things. One, the description of his craft. Although the size was enormous, I have no experience with a craft that size, but the craft he designed was precisely the same craft that we had come in contact with in our operations within the United States, and that is, it was a disc with the 8-gun construction when viewed from above. The other thing was he spoke of the containers, and his initial speculation was that they must have been moving drugs because they had something on the top that looked like some form of HVAC system of some kind. And I knew right away those were the same type of containers we use for the Psi team when they're operating and being transported. So
what are the containers used for?
The containers are used for transportation of the Psi team and also just as an operating base. It's a mobile operating base. And so this quickly went off the rails because for some reason, the term human trafficking got put into the story got put into the minds of the people that were hearing his story after I got involved.
So what did Michael Herrera think? He thought they were either gun running or drug running, didn't he?
Yeah, he thought that's what he assumed, they were running drugs. And I knew that those type of containers, when associated with that craft, were used for the Psi team. That's why they had mini split HVAC units on the top, provide comfortable environments inside for humans for either transportation or for operation. You can operate inside those containers. And they're sealed. They're kind of like a Faraday cage in that regard, where it allows you to concentrate. If you're going to operate from those, you can concentrate on your work as a Psi asset, or they're used to mobilize.
So clearly, whoever those men were, they were American, they were private military contractors, and they weren't very friendly.
No.
Are they the people that you feel pose a threat at times to the legitimate operations of the program?
Yeah, I think it doesn't take many bad apples to ruin the batch.
Because to make the point, you're at pains, aren't you, to
I guess we can leave it there. It's great how he fills in those little, because I always wondered why would there be human trafficking? Like, why would they be cramming humans into these containers? And Jake just seems to know it as a matter of fact, like that they're not cages, they're just mobile offices. And he knows that.
It's just such a fucking crazy detail. Like, the expanded story behind it is like, he goes on to talk about these assets, the psionic assets, are extremely well taken care of. They love what they do. They are a part of this program because they want to be there. They're from all over the world. There's a clip towards the end. Do you have this clip where he talks about who they choose and how they select?
No, but
I've got it timestamped for it.
All right,
somewhere.
excellent. Yeah, just to add to that point, he says these people literally like live their life basking in the light of what Barber felt when he felt all of that love and energy coming from the ship. So he says like these guys are super happy because they're just basking in the glow of spirituality all the time.
They're basking in the glow of this spiritual whatever all the time. They are chosen. There are certain groups of people who have what they call their P3s. They have the psionic predisposition. I wrote it down. What is it? Psionic. Oh, I just had it written down. Oh, it's under my phone. Here it is. What was it called?
You and your old
I
school
lost
paper.
it. I've got too many
this is the
pieces
problem
of
with paper.
This is the problem with paper, but it's the problem with
Yeah.
all of it. But anyway, psionic predisposition something, and it's a 3P designation that they have for these people. And there's certain groups that are more predisposed to having this psionic capability than others. And he goes into a sort of detailed explanation of who these folks or the groups that these folks are selected from. And then he explains how they can connect with a craft, remotely pilot the craft with their consciousness. I assume, based on what he's saying here, that when they're in that mode, that's when they're in this sort of like blissful state, which sounds is a totally new data point for me. I'd never heard anything like this. They can pilot. He says at another point in the interview, they can remotely pilot the craft down to the ground or get it close into like a certain zone. And then they have to like disconnect from the craft, and then they hit the craft with an EMP. And that's how they catch them.
And there could be consequences if the mind is still connected to the craft in some way.
Do you remember what he said?
No.
A piece of your consciousness can stay inside the craft. That's what Ross said. And I think the reason Ross said it is because I think Ross had that data point from somewhere else. Ross, that's one thing. Ross was like cross-checking stuff that he had heard from other people with Jake in real time. And you're watching Jake sort of like kind of go like this, like, how do you know? Oh yeah, that is true. And it's interesting. But this whole notion of being able to pilot it remotely, and that there's teams of these people and they're all over the world. He goes into this story about how private companies and private individuals are running their own crash retrieval programs. He's like, this isn't just a government thing. There's tons of groups doing this. And the government is just one of them. They've got their own psionic assets that they work with. And it's just like the scope of this story just became enormously more complicated and interesting.
Maybe we go to the section where he talks about that large gathering of influential people. What was it called? The Esalen.
Before we go there, so I think the big thing, the big takeaway from all this, that I'm just now like getting to a point where I can summarize it in my own head, is that here's what's going on, people. Like, if you want the short version of what Jake Barber's talking about in this interview, here it is. The people inside the program who have been doing this for the American military for however long are all not all, but I think most of them are super smart, highly trained, high speed individuals who are committed to their country. And a lot of them are not happy with the situation regarding the secrecy behind all this, and they are defecting. And because they all have a particular set of skills, they have gotten together and formed this group of intelligence operatives and trained military experts and guerrilla warfare tacticians and strategists and officers and scientists. And it's basically open source. All these people are out now. So they've just gotten together and they've gotten the funding, private venture capital funding, which I guess is where the whole Wall Street connection comes from that we've talked about here for a while. And they're going after it. They're going for this thing. They're going to do it. They're going to, not only are they going to go get a craft, but they're going to show it off. They're going to do this whole thing publicly and they're going to show the world. And it's crazy. And can we watch that clip that you've queued up and he'll explain what happens next?
The Esalen clip?
The Esalen Institute.
So I didn't know what this was, but we'll play the clip first and then...
There was a gathering at Esalen.
Okay.
And a lot of very high net worth individuals who were interested in suppression of non-human intelligence attended. What happened?
I think something epic happened. I think something happened that, if it was fully documented and understood, would go in the history books.
I had a feeling last week that that was historical.
It felt absolutely historic. What you had was a combination of the world's leading, like most frontier scientists. You had people that were top experts in all their fields. And then you had a variety of fields that was outrageous. We had neurosurgeons, doctors in neurosurgery. We had physicists. We had high net worth individuals in the billions that were extremely open-minded and had a frontier attitude towards all this. We had mystics. We had psychic kids. We had children from Germany that could harness and actually showcase their ability to perform telekinesis, their ability to psychically see things with their mind, and were able to prove that to all of us. We also deployed some of our psionic assets that we've used and are part of our new team with Skywatcher, and we summoned UAP. We had the UAP come and fly around and visit and hang out with us and take off.
And I have to say, I saw it too.
Yeah.
And it was profound. It's a spiritual experience, and what you're trying to do now is replicate in the private sphere what's being suppressed in the public sphere.
Yeah, you know, we're not looking back. You know, we can leave the bad actors of the past, we can leave them with their lies. We have no need for that. We're looking forward. I am absolutely confident that we are capable of generating the type of high quality sensor data and photography and film evidence that everyone is wanting. I'm also confident that if we continue on the path with our government agencies, that we're going to get a craft, we're going to get material in hand. I know it's possible, it's just a matter of working out the logistics.
But I'm just exploring this with you. The implications are that there's one part of the black world of the US government that is being hidden from Congress, hidden from some presidents I know,
Yeah,
working on retrieved alien, non-human technology.
yeah.
It's being kept from the knowledge of the American public. And yet they're being funded with taxpayer dollars, billions of taxpayers' dollars, if you believe it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's as good a time as any to bring Pavl into the chat.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me.
Pavl's entered the green room.
in. There he is. I'll adjust
Dr.
your camera.
Jones. Hey, man.
I think you're muted, Pavl.
Hey, sorry.
There we go.
How's everyone doing?
Better now. After
What
watching
a
that interview, you
wild-
weren't kidding.
What a wild day, huh?
Dude. I told everybody when we started the show, I was like, when Pavl talks, you guys got to listen. He is got his finger on the pulse. You melted my brain with this one, dude. What do you think? What did you take away from this Ross interview, this full interview with Jake Barber? What was your, tell people why this is so significant in your own words.
Well, first of all, I think Jake revealed part of the phenomenon, not the entire scope of it. He revealed the part that he is interacting with, and people who engage in this type of communication have interacted with for a long time. And this obviously includes the indigenous communities who I keep going back to an interview I saw. I think it was a Brazilian channel where they interviewed people from indigenous communities in the Amazon forest, and they talk about these beings as if they knew them forever. I think it was Iwabanku or something like that. They
I think
they have a name for them.
the ant people, I think they call
Yeah.
it. They say they live inside the earth.
Yeah, and that's what my biggest takeaway from that was, that, and obviously the potential that we have. Because if you guys didn't notice, Jake mentioned the Explorers Club, and when Alex Clokus, who did the presentations at SALT with Dr. Gary Nolan and Carl Nell, I reached out to him on X, and he sent me the website months ago of this Explorers Club. And over the last few months, I've been getting names of people who are part of this Explorers Club. And when Jake and Ross talk about this event that happened a few weeks back, that is part of the Explorers Club.
That's what he was talking about. Okay.
Yeah, that's what he was talking about.
Perhaps if we sort of talk about what Esalen is, because I imagine quite a lot of the audience probably doesn't know what it is. So let me pull up this clip. Not clip, sorry. It's just a website that we're going to look at. We're going to look at Esalen's website. So I don't know if you can see that, Clint.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read it?
You go ahead. You've got that lovely, sweet voice, and I'm out of my words now.
You're running out of words. Okay. It says, a greater life is pressing to be born. Esalen is a creative laboratory, an incubator of human potential, asking the daring and curious questions that traditional university and religious institutions can't and or won't. 1962 marked the beginning of this extraordinary journey, an adventure of minds, bodies, spirits, and souls, where Michael Murphy and Richard Price, young Stanford graduates who were inspired by the ideas of Abraham Maslow and Aldous Huxley, together founded Esalen, the birthplace of the human potential movement. Today, more than 6 decades later, Esalen is a world-renowned holistic learning and leading global retreat center for guests and faculty to explore and realize their human potential through experience, education, and research. Public workshop and private conference programming pushes our growth edges closer toward collectively living in a more just, creative, and sustainable world. Well, that sounds lovely. It says, we envision a world where Esalen is a major catalyst in the transformation of humankind, working with individuals and institutions to integrate body, heart, mind, and spirit, and community in a nurturing relationship with the environment. Our Big Sur campus is a community-created space that resides on land that was historically inhabited by the Esalen tribe and is currently co-stewarded with the Esalen tribe of Monterey County. And they sponsor pioneering initiatives and offer personal, spiritual, and social transformation programs for residents, interns, and workshop participants. Esalen, as both an idea and as a place, provides a nourishing container for visitors, guests, and faculty curious to explore some of what works and what doesn't in the ongoing search for individual and collective growth, transformation, and healing. And then it just goes on. some of the people involved underneath.
So
It's
it's
a lot
like
of
one of
detail
those.
here.
It's like one of those places where you effectively go to like explore your own mind, I guess, and grow spiritually and stuff like that. It's just so interesting that a tier 1 helicopter pilot that's involved in crash retrievals would be so interested in something like that, and even potentially hold some sort of event there. Pavl, I got the link for the Explorers Club. I can share that now. If you know more about it, feel free to talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, so basically the Explorers Club, as far as I know, and it's very, very straightforward here. What I don't like about this, and I'm sorry if I don't understand it fully from people who are part of this, is that this seems to be sort of an elitist kind of club, because it was formed by Cloacus, or he's part of it at least, and it's an event that is like accessible to only a select group of people, billionaires, scientists, free thinkers that are famous, stuff like that. If I'm wrong, then I will apologize. But so far, it seems something like this, like an exclusive type of club. But they have some of the most important questions that we've been asking for a while. And the fact that it's now like a big initiative and they're showing stuff in these events, like what Jake said about these kids showing telekinesis and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I think that's mind bending, and I wish I could attend one of these events eventually.
What's the
Um,
URL
but
for this website, Xander? So people can.
So it's ennea.io, ENNEA.io, ENNEA.io.
yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, it's a great looking website. Was the inaugural event the one that they're talking about in the Barber?
no,
Interview?
that one, the inaugural one happened back in October.
Oh, okay.
But last week, apparently, that one was like the most incredible one, where a lot of shit was shown that people's minds were blown and all that stuff.
It almost feels like it was like a secret that was kept, because I had no idea that was going on. Was that like common knowledge? Did anybody know about this?
Let me tell you, this was sent to me by Cloacus on the 27th of May when I reached out to him. And it was right after Carl Nell's presentation. And no, I don't think it was secret because he didn't tell me don't share or anything like that. It just passed through me. I was just like, okay, this is a new website he's promoting. Then I started getting information of people with incredible credentials, people from NASA, from the CIA, experts in drones, shit like that, that in their resume they had part of the Explorers Club, part of the Explorers Club. And I kept seeing it and I was like, wait. And yesterday, just before the interview with Jake, I decided to reach out to Cloacus because I found out that he was the one sponsoring Skywatcher. And I completely forgot he shared that. And I was like, holy hell.
These guys are so bad at publicity. Why are they so bad?
Yeah.
They really need help. They have the best, most amazing stories ever, and they just can't figure out how to tell them.
Yeah.
Was this okay? So my understanding, the way that Jake Barber describes and Ross described this event, is that it's the closest thing in my mind that I can think of is it's like that scene in Close Encounters on top of the mountain where the ship arrives at the end and they've got all the scientists and all the camera people are there and they're playing the music back and forth. Is this kind of like, if people are trying to imagine it, is that kind of like what they saw?
If you supplant a big ship with orbs, that's the only difference, I think. But yeah, it was similar to that.
So now a minute ago, Pavl, you said something interesting, and the way you phrased it, I thought was interesting. You said these are the ones that he's been interacting with. Are you dancing around the idea that there are still yet other players in this game that are non-human but aren't?
There's a lot of documented evidence. Dr. John Mack's book is a perfect example of that. That these interactions are not always positive. They're very traumatic for a lot of people. There's even molesting involved in some cases, some really dark stuff. If you talk to or read Whitley Strieber's book, and he just came out with another book, actually, The Fourth Mind, I think it's called. You can tell that there are a lot of different interactions that are not consistent with what Jake is talking about here. But what Jake is talking about here is consistent, for example, with Chris Bledsoe's story, which is,
Yes.
for the most part, positive. And I think that there's also a misconception because they say that gay men who are left-handed are more like prone to have these sensibilities. But I would want to disagree with that because I think that men, even if they're gay or straight, who are more in touch with their sensibility and their feminine side, because we all have one, those are the ones that are more in tune with those abilities. Men who are like shrouded in this false idea of masculinity, because I think the mere concept of masculinity has been twisted,
It's toxic,
especially,
Pavl.
yeah,
It's toxic.
especially over the last 20 years. And I think masculinity is something really positive, but it's being confused by that other thing that
Yeah.
doesn't treat women right and has this idea that men don't cry and men don't have to share their feelings because they look stupid or ridiculous, or that is why I think there's this confusion right now. We do live in a world that is overly divided by this masculinity against femininity, and I think that needs to change at a certain point. This is a good first step, I think.
It's both, isn't it? I mean, right. I agree with you. There's this. I think that there are aspects of masculinity that have been probably just overemphasized in our culture because it's profitable. Just like there are aspects of femininity that have been commercialized and turned into something that's sort of distorted from what it should be. But at the end of the day, it's really a balance, right? I mean, that's what the yin yang is all about. It's this this sort of balance of sensibilities. I noticed he said a few things. He said gay left-handed men. He said women, and he said
children.
Specifically children. It's like kids can do this, and because they're so free, they're just not encumbered by the weight of the world. Maybe they're more. And I also thought it was interesting that he suggested that a Faraday cage is helpful to put these people in a Faraday cage, so when they do their contact protocols or whatever it is they're doing, that they can be more effective.
And this gave me another clue to why my main case of Dr. Greenberg, of why he disappeared. Because if you look at his work throughout his entire career, he studied kids. He taught kids how to read without looking. He studied shamans. He studied the most famous Mexican shaman in history, Pachita, and all of their psi abilities. And then he tried to replicate telepathy. He tried to make it mainstream, to announce it to the world that it was real. And when he was trying to do that, and he was going to be extremely mainstream because he was going to India, that's when he disappeared. And I think that he also used Faraday cages. That's why I brought it up, because his main experiment was with Faraday cages.
We talked about, we were just kind of like kicking it around internally a while back of like, could you take were you part of this conversation, Pavl? I think you were. We were talking about, could you take a float tank, an isolation tank, and put, run an audible frequency through it, so you get the water going at a certain frequency, and you get the person floating in the tank.
I wasn't part of the conversation, but this is really interesting. Please.
And if you could put that in a Faraday cage, you could create basically a space capsule for psychonauts that could, like, you know what I mean? Like, you could actually build a room that you could go into that would be conducive to or enhance your ability to react telepathically.
Sort of like Cerebro, right? From the
kind of. But probably, I'm sure there's like a low-tech Home Depot like hardware store way you could do it. Like a little kid's pool and some chicken wire. But yeah, but I think because sort of the crux of a lot of the work that you've been doing at Psychoactivo has been about, uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my takeaway is that you're working on ways that this can be crowdsourced, sort of
Yeah.
like open sourced.
It starts, and let me tell you something that I've been introduced to since I was a kid. There's this um, sort of like seminar that I attended when I was younger from a doctor who is Mexican. His name was Rutilio Romero Higgins, and he created a method that has like elements of a little bit of everything. It has elements of Gestalt, elements of uh, um, what's it called? Productive programming or something like that. And they taught us how to use, for example, one of the tools is called the observer. And it's basically you focus your mind to observe things that you want to either happen or you want like to avoid. And you start using it through meditation, and you close your eyes and you start using it. And what I didn't know back then is when they taught me how to use my observer, I started using it de facto my entire life. And I've been using it my entire life. So, just to give you a stupid little example, my mom always complains with me that whenever she goes to Costco or somewhere else, and there's a lot of cars and she can't find a parking spot, she always complains that I always find a parking spot within the first 5 minutes that we arrive. It doesn't have to like, and it always happens. She's like, "How the fuck are you doing?" I'm like, "You taught me this. You were the one who brought me to this seminar. So I've been using my observer for my entire life." That's one thing, but there are many different things that I think that we can start learning how to use in order to improve our entire ecosystem, not just our lives. Because we need to understand also, whether we like it or not, we're eventually moving towards that um, connectivity between ourselves. That's where we're going.
I think the part of the interview where Jake Barber talks about what he calls the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Do you remember this part?
Yes.
He goes, that's what he says he calls it. He calls their group the League of, this is just his term for it. He goes, I call it the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's a group of individuals, both men and women from all different parts of the military and government intelligence. And these are the people that were in the program. They have the skills. That's who they are. And now they're doing it with private funding, and they're going to do it. Now that remains to be seen. But of course, what he says is they're going to show this to the world. They're going to make it open source. And he's saying they're going to try to capture a craft. I think that's more or less what he describes. And that would be the thing. So that's in line with, he goes on, he actually talks about catastrophic disclosure, and he says that's not what we really want. Be careful what you wish for. He says that a bunch of times too. He says we don't want catastrophic disclosure. We want a controlled disclosure, but we don't have to wait on the government for that. We could go do this on our own.
Another part that he mentioned that I thought was interesting was he kind of defended the military industrial complex.
That was interesting too, wasn't it?
I do see where he's coming from, because he's from the military background. He probably has a lot of friends there, and he grew up in that culture. But I think Jake must understand how the culture has been so contaminated over the years that a lot of things do need to change within the culture in there. Specifically, places like, for example, the CIA or the Air Force, who've always been very closed to the public in many ways. And the CIA, we know they've done a lot of shady stuff over the years.
Oh
That
my
when
God.
it all comes out, man, a lot of things are definitely going to change. And I'm sure he understands that. I'm sure he sees it. But where he's coming from, I think, and this is something that I've been speaking to scientists who have clearances and stuff like that um, over a few months, and I can see that there are a lot of good people there that do want the truth out. But we also need to understand that we live in a polarized world that is constantly in war, looking at the best way you can like one up your rival, that mentality still prevails. So we need to be careful with that too, because we can't just go like, oh, it's all love and light and shit. No, dude, it's a process. It's, you know.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think I picked up something that Chris Bledsoe said in his appearance on the Bledsoe Said So podcast. Did you watch that one? You have a chance to watch? And did you notice how that kind of lined up with what Jake Barber was saying?
Yes.
How he said that Chris Bledsoe says that the orbs are the UFOs. Like, it's all the same thing. The orbs can manifest as a UFO, like a physical craft. They can manifest as an orb. They can manifest as a physical being. And I think I'm paraphrasing, but he said that what we're going to start to see starting very soon, he said we're going to see them manifest. The orbs are going to show up and allow themselves to be photographed and seen. And then I guess to some extent, they're going to start to manifest as beings. And he has a dream that he talks about. He had a dream where he was out west, somewhere out in the American Southwest, and he sees seven suns, or was it three suns?
And they
then
go down.
Mm-hmm.
And then another sun, like kind of far away from the rest.
He has this really bizarre. Yeah.
Is it in one of these clips? Because I've got a couple of clips, haven't I, from the Bledsoe podcast?
Yeah, let's take a look.
All right.
And you said, but I feel like those original sons that descended were the old evil powers,
The old
going
powers,
away.
Yeah, and the return.
Yeah.
Wow.
The shift in the age.
The return of this powerful force is coming. And it's coming. I've warned everybody for the last 15 years this is going to happen. And the sky's full of stuff right now.
Yep.
And if you read my book, I've been writing about this for 15 plus years, talking about it. And I just, so.
It's a natural next point that I wanted to get to next. But before we talk about what's happening now, I wanted to also say this. About a month ago, Emily had a strange dream. And she woke up. She's explained it to me in vivid detail that when she woke up, she had the feeling that she actually had a face-to-face encounter with an entity, which she knows what that feels like. Right. But in her dream, she saw one of the beings, and it was face-to-face with her, and it told her, soon we are going to allow you to capture footage of us fully manifest.
That's coming.
And she woke up, and she was like almost in shock, like, having heavy breath and almost in like a sweat, and she said it felt very real when she woke up from that dream. But
she just had that dream like a month ago?
About a month ago, yeah.
Wow.
It's time. It's coming. And the world's going to change. There's nothing nobody can do about it at all. They could try, but it's not going to work. This phenomenon, the internet, and this information age is what's going to change it all. You can't stop it. And you can't stop them from coming. That's what I'm saying. They're shooting at them now, and they can't shoot them out.
They're here.
They got military drones up there. They're saying we don't know what they are, but we know what they are. They're ours, and I'm sure of it. So I have other sources that a friend of mine put a laser on one, and the FBI came to his house in 30 minutes.
What?
Yep.
Yeah.
Put a laser on one of the drones or the orb? Oh, okay.
Yeah, a friend in New Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
whoa.
Yep. So the orbs are watching whatever the drones are doing, or they're so afraid because all these orbs are coming that I've been predicting about, they're trying to muddy the water with the drones.
That seems right to me.
It could be that way.
I feel
or
like
the drones are searching for something that's hazardous to our health. And the drones are, and the orbs are on alert. Just like the Foo Fighters would have been in World War II. Right at the height of the war, when the most suffering and bombing and tragedy, the Foo Fighters were flying along beside the airplanes when they're going to battle.
Yeah, which were UFOs.
Yeah.
There's all these reports of
UFOs.
Yeah, pause it there. So a couple interesting points about this. He says this dream that he describes, it's a longer dream, and if you go back maybe a minute before where we started, he kind of gets into the expanded details of that. But this interview, basically, what I take away from the whole thing is that Chris Bledsoe says, this is coming, there's no stopping it, and there's nothing anyone can do to divert it or delay it. This is already on the calendar, and it's just a matter of time before it happens. And that is almost exactly what Jake Barber says at the end of his interview with Ross. He says, this is going to happen. This is a fundamental thing. This is part of our reality. And Jake Barber uses a very specific set of words. He says, these are spirits. He says the orbs are spirits. He said these spiritual beings, or these spirit beings, I think is the exact quote that he uses. Somebody could check me on that. But he says these spirit beings are going to make themselves visible. They are on their own timetable. They're running on their own clock, and it has nothing to do with what we want or don't want. It's just going to be. And he said that his group, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or they've started this Skywatcher group that's trying to go out and actually, I guess, attract a UFO or attract an orb or attract a craft and then capture it. They're funded by private money. They're going to make this all open source. So from the 30,000 foot view, it looks like all of these little bits and pieces, all of these different characters that have been working at the edges of the disclosure narrative for so long, that have been kind of trying to chew into this thing and get towards the center. All of that is starting to bear fruit. And now these dots are connecting in a way that I'd never expected before. What do you guys think about sort of the confluence of events and all these different things we're hearing from different people? Do you think they're lining up for you too?
Sander?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be brief because my voice is totally shot at this point. But yeah, everything it's been making sense for about a year for me now. In terms of like the fundamental question, which is like, what are these actual things? I don't think there's actually a word that describes them correctly yet. I think eventually they'll fall into their own category, where we'll have aliens, gods, spirits, angels, demons. They'll sort of all coalesce into this. Okay, they're the other guys. Like they're the ones that we know are responsible for this, and we'll call them that. That will be the name that they are from now on. But in terms of what everything is, yes, everything's lining up. Like, this is why I've been so strongly in defense of Greer, because he really is falling in line with a lot of this stuff now. In terms of, I'm still a firm believer that it's likely that all of these NHI are peaceful, and so far Barber's had the exact same sort of impression, is that they're all completely peaceful in nature. Greer's obviously a full advocate that they're all peaceful. I don't know enough about Bledsoe to say whether or not he thinks that they're all peaceful, but he's a peaceful guy, at least.
I don't think I've ever heard him say anything negative about these beings.
Yeah.
Like he seems very, very comfortable with what's about to happen.
That for me is the
I think
end.
that only Greer has said they're all peaceful. And when they asked Barber and they asked Bledsoe, because I also saw the Matt Bell interview yesterday he did with Bledsoe, and Matt Bell asked him point blank, do you think that it's possible that there are also negative entities? And he said, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah,
I haven't seen them, but it's possible.
That's the one leap that Greer's clearly made. He's made the assumption that because every single one that he appears to have been in contact with has been peaceful, that they must all be peaceful. These guys haven't quite gone that far. They've just said that we haven't encountered any non-peaceful yet. So that would be my take.
I think that Jim Semivan's testimony in that documentary Dan Farah is dropping, I think that he's going to talk about the negative experience he had a little bit more in detail. And that will also give us more insight into that other aspect, because that's why I love the Secret Machines books, man, because they really encompass absolutely everything, both the positive, the negative, the human aspect of it, how historically we've also been guilty of a lot of stuff related to this, with the Nazis and the Sinister Forces book that Peter Levenda wrote, that is also tied to this, you know. So it's not, I don't think it's all love and peaceful, but I think both sides do exist, and whenever all of this is like revealed or some type of showcase happens, I don't think it will be all that peaceful. I think there will be some trouble. Even Chris Bledsoe said that yes, a new knowledge is coming, but there will be trouble. That's what the lady told him, you know.
A new knowledge is like, that's an interesting term, because the way that Jake Barber described the telepathy thing, he was like, this is something that's fundamentally available to all people. And so it sounds like what we're about to figure out as a species is that we all have this extra ability, and that it can be proven, and then beyond that it can be refined, strengthened. And if it becomes a thing where people start to learn that we have this ability, and you can start to explore your telepathic side, does that, if enough people are doing it, does that shift our consciousness into a higher plane, and does that change the whole scenario for us? I think that's a very great, a very good question. I agree with you also that there are too many stories that are too weirdly negative to ignore, to pretend like that's just a fluke or some kind of like weird glitch in the data, or that those are just outlier experiences. There just are too many situations where people have been taken aboard craft and had horrifying experiences.
I think what you could say in slight defense there is, for a start, we don't know who's actually perpetrating those. We've got people that say that it's us masquerading and stuff, but you've also got the aspect of, you know, the zookeeper hypothesis, where, you know, you've got to take your dog to the vet every now and then.
Or mice.
My cat is traumatized every time she has to go. Like, I've got one of those like really fluffy cats, so to put it bluntly, every few months we have to go down her backside with a shaver because it gets a bit natty down there. And she hates it every single time, but it's for her own good. And without it, she would be so much more sad. Like, so that's perhaps one angle to take.
He also, there's one word in the Jake Barber interview. He says it one time, and he says hybrids. Did anybody else catch that?
I did.
He says hybrids. And this is kind of at the tail end of the interview, and they don't go there, but it reminds me of all of the abduction stories that I've read, where they're taking genetic samples and genetic material, and all of these cases where people have claimed many, many times that there's something going on where they're trying to create some kind of a hybrid branch of alien-human hybrids. I thought that was a really interesting. It was an interesting word to hear him say. I'll put it that way. As to how exactly he meant it in the context of the larger thing he was trying to say, I can't be sure, so I'm speculating here. But I noticed that the thing with kids is very interesting to me. I'm sure abductions are going to come up in this conversation at some point. But I also, to your point earlier, Pavl, I thought it was interesting that he goes into this defense of the military-industrial complex. And he's very much like, there's a few bad apples, but that's not the whole group. And it reminded me of something that came up months and months ago. Maybe the play here is for some kind of immunity. Maybe that's the play. We're going to let some of this stuff come out, but we're going to have to forget about the past and kind of just move on.
That's a bad idea.
I think it's a bad idea, but I guess it's a good question though. Like, if you could have disclosure tomorrow, and you could have a new world, but you can't go after anybody, you got to let them all go. Do you take it?
It depends on whether we really are getting free energy and things are really going to change. Then yeah, I would. I would ignore them for the rest of their lives and just let them live their lives, you know. But if we don't get that and things are still a mess, people need to pay for what they did, man. Karma is a thing. you know?
So let's talk about the Lockheed firefight story.
Yeah.
'Cause this is the big one. This is the first thing that really blew up my brain with dynamite in the middle of this interview. On Reddit, a few months ago, this is almost I guess about a year ago, is the first time I heard about it. Somebody pointed me to this story they called the Lockheed firefight. And I followed this rabbit hole, and it was this guy on a YouTube channel that had been interviewed, and he was saying, he was telling this story about 2 crash retrieval teams come upon a crashed UAP in the middle of nowhere, unbeknownst to one another. They both arrive at the same time, and they get into a firefight. And in that firefight, a number of Americans are killed. That's the story. And when I read it, when I first saw it and I started looking into it, it felt so hot, I didn't want to touch it. I was scared to actually go there. I didn't want to do a video. I just didn't. I was like, this one's too on the money. It just felt too weird. And Jake Barber just confirmed that was a real event in this interview.
Yeah.
That a private aerospace company had contracted with his group, which were all former crash retrieval experts in their various fields. They had been given a budget, they'd been given a task, they'd been sent to recover this stuff. When they get to where they're going, another crash retrieval team is there. This one is the American government, American military. And what they were tracking on both, they were both tracking the same craft, but that craft just so happened to be an alien reproduction vehicle. This is according to Jake Barber, that was built by human hands, but was basically a UFO built by humans. Their craft goes down. They send. At the same time, the military is sending a team out thinking this is an actual UFO. They get there, they get into a firefight with each other, and a couple of Americans die. And when he tells that story, he chokes up and he gets really weird. And it was a weird one. What did you guys make of that? What was your takeaway from that bit?
Me? Okay. So I've been hearing about this for months now too. And what I know now is that this crash actually happened in Mexico.
Was
So
it in
I'm
Mexico?
yeah, it was initially, it wasn't clear if it fell on New Mexico or in Mexico, but it fell in Mexico actually. And I'm looking into this. I was very surprised that Jake said that specific piece of data, because I found out about this being in Mexico about 2 weeks ago or something. So I'm looking into it, and I still don't know whether actually looking into it deeply would maybe get me in trouble. I'm like being really careful about it on who I ask and all that. But it's something that also is consistent with what Jake said, is that this incident is just one of many that have happened for a long time. Something similar happened in the Coyame crash back in the 70s, that a bunch of Mexican soldiers went to a crash in Tamaulipas, and when they arrived, there was also like a CIA operation that was that got there, and the CIA guys claim that all the Mexican soldiers were already dead when they got there. And honestly,
That's what
I
all the
don't believe-
CIA guys always say.
I don't believe that shit for a second, you know?
We all saw Sicario.
Yeah.
I think that's where the story gets really weird. I had a conversation with Kelly Chase a while ago, and to your point, Pavl, she said, I don't talk a lot about aerospace companies because it can affect your quality of life. That was basically what she said. She's like, I stay away from that one. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. I think I'm going to steer clear of that too. But it looks like it's going to be coming out one way or the other. He seemed really weird. He was talking about it like it was the hottest of hot potatoes, and he really had to be careful about how he phrased. He's speaking in code and blinking in Morse code the whole time, and he's trying to say like, yeah, this was like I was part of that, but he's not actually saying that. It's a very interesting clip, and you can tell that was the moment. He says that was kind of the moment where it all went sideways. And then he and his team decided internally they were going to flip the script on this thing, and they were going to go after these guys and try to blow the lid off this whole deal. And then that's where the shift really happened. He decided that this was going to be his new quest. And at the end of the interview, he's like, got this new, he's resolute and determined. And he's like, I've got my why now. I understand what my mission is. This is my only focus. This is my only goal. I can promise you we're going to do this thing. It's too important. It's too critical for humanity. We're going after it. We're going to make this happen. And he's like, I'm confident. And when Chris Bledsoe basically said more or less the same thing, that this is coming one way or the other, it just, all of these other statements that we've been hearing for years now started to click. And it makes sense now why all these different various CIA guys like Semivan, like Ramirez and so many others, and all of the cryptic things Lou has been talking about, they started to kind of come together. And I feel like that's really what this Jake Barber interview did. It filled the gaps in a bunch of different areas. It was almost like finding like 40 pieces of the puzzle that have all been missing and just being able to plug those in. And now we can see so much more of the picture.
Yep. And I also want to recall when he said, I'm the boogeyman. That was cool. I was like, damn.
He had all these great one-liners in there.
Real life Chuck Norris over here.
Also, what was the beginning of, did you watch the first 5 minutes of that whole Ross Coulthart bit where he's talking about Chuck Norris?
Did you see that? The sponsor.
Chuck Norris is his sponsor.
For what? What is Chuck Norris trying to sell?
Some type of medicine. I don't know, but he's one of his sponsors.
Like
I
Chuck
made a
Norris.
joke months ago. Months ago that I was like, oh man, we can't mess with Ross now. Now he has Chuck Norris on his corner and shit like that.
He was super into Chuck Norris for the first 5 minutes. I could not recommend it more. I would tell everybody this is the interview. If you don't know what to watch, you got too many things to catch up on. If you did one thing, take 3 hours out of your life and go listen to this full, complete interview with Jake Barber and Ross Coulthart, because it's the one.
We only touched on like 3 or 4 major things out of that interview. They've got the whole, like, his whole saga with Dopser, where he kind of turns the tables on Dopser. That's a huge hero move. So yeah.
He literally Liam Neeson's his way through that process.
Yeah.
And there's the whole Tough books. And I mean, very little of what we've talked about is about the actual egg and crash retrieval stuff. But really, it kind of, we've heard a lot about crash retrievals. I buy that he was on crash retrieval teams. Let's just hear what else he's had to say. Even he confirms that deep underground military bases exist. He says he's been to them. And then he gets pushed a bit and he just immediately goes, not a chance. I'm not talking about that.
I'm not going to tell you, Ross.
Not a chance. So yeah, I'd echo what you said, Clint. If anybody's going to watch, if you've got 3 hours, watch the whole thing start to finish, and it'll at least confirm whatever suspicions you might have. If not, you'll learn a hell of a lot more, like, new stuff that will fit really nicely into everything that you know so far. I mean, there was another part of that Bledsoe clip that you wanted to play. I don't know if it's still relevant or.
We can come back to it in a minute. I was just going to go one step further on the whole thing that Herrera said, the expanded context that Jake Barber offers for that 8-gone craft. Herrera and his unit of Marines in Indonesia show up in the jungle. Here's this 8-gone craft, which he describes as enormous. Underneath it are a bunch of pickup trucks, just big ass F1 or F250 pickup trucks or whatever, with containers, which I'm assuming he means shipping containers, is what it sounds like. He's talking about shipping containers with air conditioners on top of them, like those split unit AC things. And each one of those, according to Jake Barber, is filled with telepaths or has telepaths in it. And those are the telepaths that are in charge of, like, managing the craft and doing all this stuff. So this program is super deep. It's got to be, I mean, just the telepathy side of it has to be enormous.
Yeah. One thing, though, that I think we need to clarify there is that there was a conflation of the information. When Michael Herrera first came out with his story, he claimed that he believed there was drug trafficking involved. And then someone planted the idea that he said it was human trafficking. And that was
I
not
thought
the
it
case.
was him that said that. It wasn't?
No.
You sure?
Jake said on the interview that somebody planted this idea, but he didn't say it was Michael. And you know, it's even possible that someone planted the idea on Michael after he came out, because he's been like talking to a lot of different people during this time, and I can bet money that at least one of those is some type of agent that is trying to sway him to a different direction, you know. And
yeah,
that's
well, you know, it raises a whole nother set of questions, and there are still many unanswered questions, and there's he even says at the end, he's like, I don't know what I don't know, but what I do know is all this, and this is what I can talk about. But you know, to what extent orbs and physical craft are one and the same thing, I'm still fuzzy on that. I need some clarity on exactly what that means. Are physical craft and orbs separate? Are they the same? Can one manifest as the other? Can they go back and forth? Again, how many types of NHI are we dealing with? Is it 1? Is it 10? Is it 50? We don't know. Which ones are nice? Which ones are not so nice? I'm sure there's no way I am going to buy that there's no threat at all. I just can't buy that.
Yeah.
That's got to be proven to me. But I'm willing to go so far as to say that we're just dealing with a number of different things, and some of them are nice and some of them are not nice. Yeah. I think that's probably the most realistic place to be. Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit. We got 30 minutes left. I want to know what you guys think of the trailer for The Age of Disclosure, which I have not actually watched yet. I was going to watch it for the first time today. I was hoping we could react to it live. Have you seen it, Pavl?
Are you wearing brown pants?
Oh, man. This is going to be good.
It's a serious question.
Oh, man. I never wear pants when I do these things.
Oh, that's disgusting.
All right. And on that note, right. So, yeah, I've not seen this.
I'm wearing pants. Relax.
Clint, you've not seen this.
No.
Pavl, you've seen this, but no spoilers, please, in the next 2 minutes. And let's watch the whole thing. Oops.
The American people are ready to receive the truth.
Humanity is not the only intelligence in the universe.
Humanity is not the only intelligent species.
We are absolutely not alone.
Non-human intelligence exists.
UAPs are real, they're here, and they're not human. I spent 25 years as a senior official with the CIA.
I worked on highly classified UAP programs.
28 years as an astrophysicist.
I served as the 4th Director of National Intelligence.
Director of Aviation Security in the National Security Council.
A 1-star admiral after 32 years of service.
People that come forward with this, I feel like they've taken their life in their own hands.
I was recruited to a highly sensitive government program that investigated unidentified aerial phenomenon.
For over 16 years, on behalf of the U.S. government, I worked as a senior intelligence official on the unidentified aerial phenomenon topic.
We learned that the U.S. government was involved in a long-running secret war with other nations to collect and reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
So look at that thing. It's rotating. There's a whole fleet of them.
The first country that cracks the code on this technology will be the leader for years to come.
China has established its own version of a UAP task force.
You think for a second that they wouldn't consider using it to achieve their ends of domination?
This is similar to the Manhattan Project. This is the atomic weapon on steroids.
This is so secret. Very, very few people in our entire government have been allowed access to it.
Even presidents have been operating on a need-to-know basis, but that begins to ramp out of control.
It's not acceptable to have secret parts of government that no one ever sees.
You better be careful about a government that doesn't trust its people. because there's no telling what they'll pull on you.
This is the biggest discovery in human history.
You had information being locked away that could change the trajectory for species.
It has so many beneficial impacts, including clean energy.
We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come.
What else you want to know?
I want to know a lot, Lou.
We've been asking you for years, Lou. We've been asking you all kinds of questions.
Is it a rhetorical question?
Oh my God. That's really intense, huh?
Yes.
What do you guys think?
Sander, you first.
Is that Jay Stratton in the middle saying
Yep.
he's seen craft? I assume he means photographic evidence, and probably not. You're shaking your head. You think it might be a bit more?
He said with his own eyes.
With his own, yeah, he did. But with my own eyes, I can look at a
And he
photograph.
didn't say bodies. He said beings.
True.
Beings. I think this is we're in disclosure. This is it. We're watching it. This is how it goes down. This is how it goes down. It all makes sense now. It's these guys, all of them they each have a particular set of skills. You've got these guys at the top like Carl Nell and Lou Elizondo, who's been working with David Grush and Jake Barber and all this sort of tapestry of characters. In the background, we have these mysterious billionaires like Bob Bigelow and that are all interested in this topic. Everybody's kind of saying the same thing. All these scientists all coming forward now. And we're starting to peel back the layers and see that there is coordination here. And that's been the point all along, I think. Jake Barber says 2025 is the year. He's like, this is the year. You're going to see it this year, probably soon.
Pretty clear that this couldn't stay a secret for the rest of this year. He seemed to just know it's just falling apart in terms of like there's too many leaks, too many people they're not as scared seemingly as they used to be because they're all coming forwards. They're all stepping forwards together by the sounds of things.
What's that thing? Is it Ocean's 11 where George Clooney, or was it the one after that? He's like, Andy Garcia is like threatening him at the casino. And he's like, and George Clooney goes, well, I know all the guys you'd send after me and they like me better than they like you. So I feel like that's what's going on. It's like, these are the guys that they would be sending after each other. You know what I mean? Like the guys on the ground that do it. He calls himself, Jake Barber says, we're the fingertips of this thing. We're the fingertips. He's like David Grush, he's the shoulder. But in between the shoulder and the fingertips, there's an elbow. And sometimes if the elbow isn't coordinated with the shoulder and the fingertips, things can get crazy. And that's what's been going on. But because I'm the fingertips of this whole thing, I know what's going on at the bottom level. I can see it. And I'm here to tell you, this is what's happening next. This is where we're going from here. Because the shoulder and the fingertips are now on the same team and they're all playing together. I just thought, holy shit. This trailer just brings that all together. It drives that whole point home, doesn't it?
And there are 3 upcoming interviews, 4, that we still haven't seen, and we still don't know what these guys have seen either. Because Jake was just one part of it, but he has 3 team members. And I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, that this word hybrids. I'm just going to spitball here for a little bit, because they also mentioned John Burroughs. To those who don't know who John Burroughs is, he's the military man from the Air Force who has the only signed disability discharge, paid disability discharge, that says that he was injured by a UAP. The only person in the world that is public that has
that's the Bentwaters case, right?
Rendlesham
Forest.
Rendlesham. Yeah. And Jake confirmed in that interview that Dr. Gary Nolan has been talking to him about John Burroughs and all of his case, because I think that John Burroughs' case is one of the most important in the whole conversation, because when I spoke to him, he made it very clear that there were things that they showed him that remained classified that he did not want to talk about, and they may be related to his medical records. So, what did he see that made him so afraid and so reticent to engage with even Dr. Nolan or Ross Coulthart, because he doesn't like them at all?
Burroughs?
Yeah.
That's interesting, because wasn't the Rendlesham case the one where he touched the craft and got a download?
Yeah.
And he goes back to a hotel, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he's covered in sweat, and he grabs a pad and pen off the phone, the table next to him on the bed at the hotel, and he starts writing ones and zeros in binary code, and he just fills out like 30 pages of ones and zeros, ones and zeros, ones and
I'm
zeros.
not sure that is the case. It may be, but I don't remember that specific part of it, though.
I have to, maybe someone can check me on this, but there's a case. Linda Moulton Howe does a whole, she did a wonderful piece on this many years ago, and I've listened to it many times, but I can't recall which case it was, what the name of it was. But there's a guy comes upon a craft. It's floating in the forest. It's floating like 3 feet off the ground. He describes it as a black triangle. It looks like an arrowhead almost, and it's like really, really slick. And he touches it, and he gets a download, a telepathic download from the craft. He goes home. He's got like headaches and something's wrong with him. He can't figure it out. He wakes up in the middle of the night. He writes down, he just starts writing, like automatic writing, just ones and zeros on paper until he runs out of paper.
Apparently
and then later
apparently that's some sort of incident in Penistone.
Penistone?
I don't know. I'll have a quick look at it now.
I thought it was Rendlesham. And they translated the binary code, and it's a message, and it's got coordinates, and it's talking about this thing is basically some kind of probe from the future that arrived at this time in this place. You've got to find this. If anybody can find this information and link to it.
I think that John Burroughs' incident was that he received some type of radiation when he approached the craft, and there's some kind of missing time that he experienced as well. But that radiation caused him the same type of reaction that Jake Barber explains when he was carrying that package where his skin fell off and his hair too.
The Ark of the Covenant, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what Dr. Gary Nolan has been doing all this time. When Dr. Gary Nolan talked about these injured people from UAP, Jake was one of his patients. And he's the last interview that Ross is dropping on the 27th. And I think that there's a big possibility that Dr. Gary Nolan does go deeper into all of this. And this hybrid word, it may be mentioned there too.
Just for clarification, Sergeant James Penistone was part of the Rendlesham Forest incident. So it's a different person to Burroughs, but yeah, he received the download of binary code, so to speak.
I want to just say something. I saw something in the chat. I'm trying to see where it was. Somebody mentioned this earlier, and they were like, I've seen this come up before, and I wonder what you guys think about this. But every once in a while, someone in the chat will be like, oh, that was debunked on the Y-Files. The Y-Files did an episode on that, so we can all drop it now and move on. And it's like, I don't give a shit what the Y-Files says. I don't know that that's debunked until I see that it's debunked. Like, I need to know for myself, but I think it's really interesting how often people cite the Y-Files as like the final answer on everything. They're like, oh, no, that was already covered and it's over. Do you guys ever run into that?
They cover their backs too quite a bit, the Y-Files. I mean, they run an operation with, they don't have like an age restriction on their channel. So they have to be really careful about what they put in. And debunking is part of their MO, At the end, they almost always debunk stuff. I've only seen them not debunk, for example, the moon, because the moon is really weird. But other things that may be true, there's always a way to try and debunk them, or an angle you can take to say it's probably not true.
Do you think that there's something to that? And I don't want to just like come out and go why, but I want to say this. That channel came out of nowhere. One day it was like nothing. And the next day it had 18 million subscribers. And this was like a full blast, full speed ahead series with like real money behind it. Does that seem weird to anybody else, or am I just missing the point here that maybe it's just a really good channel and they just struck a nerve?
I mean, AJ has a past in television and comedy. So he did have the resources to start the operation. And I think that the production level of that show is one of the highest right now of these topics. So I think that people are attracted to that level of production as well. And I've been following it for a few years now, and I was there before they one of their videos was the one that just propelled them to the very top. And when that happened, and it will happen to all of these channels that are currently covering this, whenever there's some moment when one of their videos just goes viral, and it happens out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen multiple times already. And they've only increased their production value, and they've even hired a lot of people from the UFO community to help them research and write scripts and all that stuff. So the only thing is that I think that they debunk stuff because that's their MO. That's the way you do get to all of the audiences, you know. But they have the same philosophy that, for example, Art Bell had. Because Art Bell was he was really, really skeptical, but whenever he had a guest on, he always treated them with respect. And he always listened to what they had to say. He never belittled them. He never doubted them or made them ridicule in front of the audience. And that's the same kind of attitude that AJ and Hecklefish take.
That's fair. That's a good point.
I think they just do a great job of laying it out from start to finish in a concise way. They do the debunks at the end, but for me, I think they seem to be more conversation starters. They're great for getting engagement because there's a lot of anti-debunks to some of their debunks. You know, lots of people have debunked Bob Lazard, and loads of people have debunked Dr. Greer, and there's always the people that go a little bit further than that and say, actually, there's another side to that debunk that's not quite right. So it's all the conversation style. I think they do a fantastic job, especially appealing to a larger audience. I think you'd be hard. I don't think their core audience are ufologists. I don't think they're hardcore, really into UFOs. I think there's a lot of people that just find them by watching similar sort of videos on YouTube, like the top 5 sort of style videos and things like that. They're all really popular.
Dude,
I'm not trying to.
Is married to a camel, dude. What's not appealing about that?
Hecklefish. I love the Y Files in terms of entertainment value. They and the way the channel has the way the episodes are crafted, they're great. What I don't agree with is when someone just goes, "Oh, well, the Y Files already handled this and it's over, so we can all move on."
Right.
I don't agree with that at all. I'm not. I think debunking is a healthy thing. We should try to find the holes in everything. That's important. But I don't think any one person should be the final word on any of this stuff. It's got to be open source.
I agree with you. And also one other thing about debunkers and skeptics. I think that everybody should be skeptical about everything, and you should always ask questions. And every time you find an inconsistency, you should always point it out.
Yeah.
The thing is the way you do it, the messaging, and the style of communication you use. Because if you just do it out of genuine curiosity and an inquiry, that can be perceived as something that is fair, and fair questions are always welcome. But when you do it with a clear intent to just disprove everything, and obviously even when you get into vitriol and reactionary takes and all that stuff, that's what I don't like and what I do not agree with, and I will never agree with that. And I get that there's a lot of people that are angry because some of them may have had these abduction experiences and they just want retribution for this. I was just called a UFO apologist, which I found that was really funny. It's like, no, dude. I mean, I understand you're angry and I understand you want retribution, or I just don't think that is productive for this whole conversation anymore, you know? And that's the way I see it also with debunkers. If they want to add to the conversation, they need to at least keep a decorum to it, you know?
Well, yeah, it's just saying everything is it's all UFOs or it's all not UFOs. Like you can't take it, it's shades of gray, right? Even Jake Barber in this interview in the beginning, the first 45 minutes, he talks about being out on the range, and he's like, some of the stuff that we have, I can tell you, if you looked at it, you would think it's a UFO, but it's not. You won't know what you're looking at because like I know what I'm looking at, and I can tell you like some of the stuff that we have is so awesome. He's like, he's like, we've seen things come straight out of the ground, like right out of the dirt, and just fly off. And if you looked at that, you would think that's a non-human craft, but it's not. It's something else. And I'm just like, what? Okay. He's like, you'll see things that do these crazy maneuvers, but I can tell you some of these things are our technology. Now, later on in the interview, when he expands on alien reproduction vehicles and he talks about what some of these aerospace companies are doing, that starts to make a little bit more sense. But it also seems like there's a big disconnect between what private organizations are working with and what the government has. And there's like there are a lot of different players in this, and they're all doing their own thing. But it's the same, my thing with the Y-Files, it's the same thing with Dr. Greer. It's anybody who's like, I am the final answer on all this stuff. I have the final. I just, you got to get off the train somewhere.
Add to the conversation. Don't try and end it.
Yeah.
Because if you end the conversation, you're claiming absolute truth, and you're talking about fucking UAP. You can't talk about absolute truth right now. It just doesn't exist. So yeah, add to the conversation, offer, future conversation. Don't shut it down. I think that's the part that we want to get past is when, and content creators can't really be blamed for this because it's so easy these days to just read the title of a video and say, oh, well, that's the news done. And it's like, no, maybe don't just read the title of the video. Watch the video and then make your own decision, because I see it increasingly more often that it's the context that you've got to watch to really get an understanding of, and sometimes the videos just end up straight being wrong anyway. So yeah, it's never a case of, oh yeah, the Y-Files have done it, case closed. It's not. I don't think anybody should say that about any channel.
Well, it's many shades of gray. It's extremely big, this whole story. No one person has all of the information. I think all of those things are true. At best, at the content level where we're all just trying to have a conversation about it publicly. I think that's the best thing that we can offer the world, is to create that safe space and to destigmatize this issue. You just start talking about it, and you just do it, I guess, the way that, we're all trying to do it our own way. We've got our style. Pavl's got a style. You've got your own thing, and we're all coming at it from a different perspective. It's what I've always said about disclosure. It's going to take all of us. And I was heartened to see that Jake Barber said something similar. He was like, it's just going to be, it doesn't matter if you've got a PhD in physics. None of that stuff matters. What the truth is beyond that level of thinking. It's not there. It's something deeper than that. That's more fundamental to all of us. And when we do understand it, it's going to open doors to things that we never thought possible. I think what I'm most excited about, and I walked away from this just kind of thinking, oh my God, I feel for the first time in a very long time optimistic about how this could actually go, is to see the notion that there is a group of people out there that are legitimately, truly, honestly committed to a positive outcome for humankind and are truly working to reveal this in a way that is going to help our society evolve and move forward, and maybe break some of the system that is the way that our operating system is running right now is just so awful that we can break that We can break out of that paradigm and get to something like what Stephen Greer has described many times as sort of a technological utopia. And it seems like that's starting to come out of the shadows, that these people have money, they've got training, they've got the skills, they've got the talent, they've got the people, and they're doing it. The work is already underway. We just haven't even seen the beginning of this yet. It's just now starting. And I was like, man, we could be in for an amazing future if that actually plays out the way that it sounds like it might.
I also keep going back because we need to be I think we need to be wary of all of those other, shall we call them, like Peter Levenda says, sinister forces that do exist. They are there. And I don't think that they're going to let go of that power so easily. But what I took from Jake's testimony on this specific topic is that there's already a bunch of people, like billionaires and people with a lot of influence and a lot of power, that really do want the best for humanity. And these sinister forces, they don't have control over them anymore. I mean, that is very encouraging, I think. And it also tells us how much we've advanced in terms of the internet and interconnectivity overall, that allows us and gives us this freedom to start doing our own stuff like they are.
So the question then becomes, are we going to get some kind of standardized, I don't know, what am I even trying to say here? There's got to be a way. They must have looked at this. Someone must have studied this enough to figure out how to determine who's got telepathic capacities, who doesn't. If you do, how to begin accessing them, how to strengthen them, how to refine them. I want the training academy. I want to go to the Jedi Academy for telepaths. I want to figure out how to do this. There was a show, you guys probably don't remember. I don't know if anybody else out there remembers, but when I was a kid, I'm still a super nerd, but I was the nerdiest kid ever. I have a Babylon 5 baseball cap. I'll leave it there. But the show Babylon 5, if anybody watched Babylon 5, there were telepaths that worked for this group called Earth Alliance. Earth Alliance is the human, sort of part of this science fiction story. And they had a whole division, a whole branch of their intelligence services that was specifically telepaths. And they had rankings. There was like a P1, a P2, and like a P5 was the highest. If you were a P5 could like reach out and do the force choke and, like kill somebody, or they could pinch your carotid artery and make you just die. And a P3 could just read your mind, and a P1 could read your emotions. So there was like a scale there. And I wonder, is there something like that? There must be.
Yeah.
That we could, like the Monroe Institute, a standardized program. Go ahead, Pavl.
I think they already have mapped the ways that this intuition can be awakened. In the Matt Bell interview with Chris Bledsoe, he mentioned a few of them, and I think that's true. Interacting or seeing these orbs makes you more telepathic. Near-death experiences, they awaken that part of you too. Psychedelic experiences, ego deaths, they do that to you too. And there's a couple more things that you can go through, like a traumatic experience will do that to you. A loved one that you lose will get you in that space as well. And I do think that there's already protocols in place that can help you hone that at places like the Monroe Institute, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. It's coincidentally, though, I just closed an interview with Professor Jeffrey Kripal. I'm going to be speaking to him.
Oh, wow. Was that who you were just talking to?
On February 9th, I'm going to be speaking to him. But we've been exchanging emails. He recently responded. And what he's doing is extremely important for all this psi ability skills. He has at Rice University in Texas, he has what they call the Archives of the Impossible. And that is a repository of media, books, studies, all kinds of stuff that is related to the study of phenomena in general. This includes psi abilities too. So I'm going to be talking to him about this specifically. And especially now that all of this came out, I can't wait to talk to him.
Wow. I'm excited to hear that interview. That's going to be really interesting. He described, when they at the Esalen thing, the children that had telekinesis. He's like, we had children from Germany that were telekinetic, meaning these are the people who can move the salt shaker across the table or pick up an object from across the room. So the scope is somewhere between empath. I can pick up on emotions. I can feel vibes of people. I feel like that's kind of where most people are. Like your natural resting state, a calm, relaxed mind in the correct, that's rested and maybe just in a calm space. You could, if you really quieted your thoughts and you really just focused, you could pick up on the emotional content of the room, maybe, or the immediate area around you. And with some training, you could start to figure out, oh, this one is that person. This vibe is that person. And I feel like there's a spectrum that's kind of maybe goes from there all the way up to I can pick up a cup of coffee with my brain from across the room and I can set it down on a table, or I can, do something pretty spectacular, or I guess pilot a craft and get it to land. And it sounds like if what they're really, I guess the powers that be or the people, the pro-secrecy people, at least Jake Barber kind of alludes to this, what they're really afraid of is that if everybody figures out they can do this, well then, shit, the whole the wheels just come off. Everybody's we're all.
I don't think it's just them
psychic.
that are afraid.
Who else do you think is afraid?
Well, if we are dealing with another type of intelligence besides the positive one, I would be afraid of what we can do too. If I was that kind of intelligence, because some of the stuff that I've seen with my own eyes does invite me to think that we have the capability of completely manipulating our environment with thought. That's real. And that is something that, yes, the powers that be should be afraid of. But if we're dealing with something else, I would do my best to suppress that. And I think that's been happening for hundreds of years. I think that partly the Salem witch trials are part of that. The Holy Inquisition, there was something of that in there too. All of the ethnic cleansing that has been happening in many communities across the world, there's something to that too. When the Spanish conquistadors came to America, the first people that got killed were the shamans.
Yeah,
that's not a coincidence.
Yeah, I think the shamans are key. I feel like the indigenous, that's where we have to go. We in our culture, we have to, particularly in the United States, we have to admit that there is a group of people who have been holding this knowledge forever, and we have to respectfully, hat in hand, go to them and try to understand what it is that we're missing, because we clearly don't have the full picture. But that's why one of our earlier conversations, this is way back, Pavl, I don't know if you remember, but I was like, you were telling me something about this, and I was like, is that like what Carlos Castaneda was writing about? And you said, actually, no, you shouldn't. Don't look at Castaneda's stuff, because he was, look at something else.
He was in the dark side. He was in the dark side.
The dark side.
I mean, it does work. I'm not saying that a lot of what Castaneda wrote, it works, but it also takes you to a very, very dark place.
Yeah.
And there are consequences to that. So I see it as the basic alchemy principle, that whenever you want to get something out of your potion or your magic, you need to give something back equally valuable. That is, I think, real. I think that happens, and you need to keep that in mind. If you want to delve into those types of powers or abilities, you need to understand that there's a very, very dark aspect to them.
Well, I think that speaks to the importance of some kind of a school or an academy, of some kind of formalized system where you can understand that, where that's explained, and you can go, okay, so what is the path that I take to keep this, safe and I know that with my own experience involved a heavy dose of very powerful psychedelics under the care of a shaman in a controlled ceremonial setting. And I experienced, I watched the real world evaporate like steam, and I was still there, and I saw it go away. And then I was in another place and I saw other beings, and they were all around me, and it was fucking crazy. And it changed my entire life. And from that day forward, I've never been the same person. It was the one time that, it literally put me on a completely different trajectory since that moment. And I will still to this day cry if I talk about it. When I really tell the story, if I relive it, I burst into tears because it was so fundamentally powerful. If everybody could get a taste of that, if everybody could touch that and walk away with that connection. Robert Monroe said something once, and he says it many times, but it always stands out to me whenever I hear a clip where he's talking about it. He's like, once you do this, talking about his Monroe Institute out-of-body training, he's like, once you go out of body on your own, you'll never be afraid of death. He's like, that goes away. And then you just realize, like, oh, we just keep going.
Yeah.
And, that speaks to this idea that maybe there's just this parallel reality that's right there next to us. We just can't touch it. It's just right there. And it's a frequency thing. And all these beings are just there, and they're watching us like you would look at fish in a koi pond. You're just standing above it looking down, and they're like, these fucking fish just don't know that all of this is here. But they're going to know.
Maybe they're going to know. Maybe something to touch on next time. I know we're at we're at 2 hours now, but maybe something to touch on a little bit next time is sort of the intent that you've got to go into these things with, because it's my understanding that also in Barber's interview, he says that you have to go into it coming from a sense of a goodwill, for example, or at least it works far better if you come at it from an angle of love rather than, all right, once we've summoned you, what can you give us? It's nothing. You can't go into it from that angle. So.
Yeah, and he also said that when there's people that are not feeling it, it disrupts the entire operation.
Yeah,
that was really interesting.
And how far away do you know what I mean? Like physically, do you have to be a certain distance away from those people? And we talked about beings. We're talking about some of the people that we've talked about on this show in the past. People like Dan Burrish, who have described a telepathic communication with a physical being he called J-Rod. He's like, well, for at least 30 feet, I knew that he could tap into me, like from that distance. If I got farther away, I can't say for sure, but maybe. But I could feel it when I was in the room, line of sight almost. So I guess what I'm getting at is like, there's a movie, I'm dating myself here. There's a movie called Flatliners with Julia Roberts and Oliver Platt and Kiefer Sutherland, and I think Emilio Estevez is in it. It's like great cast.
Fuck, we're old.
Remember that movie?
Yeah.
They're med school students and they figure out that they can flatline each other and cross over to the other side. And so they start this process of like, they stop each other's hearts, and they're going for like, how long can we go under? And it's like, oh, I went under for 2 minutes, or I can go under for 2.5, or I go under for 2:45. And when they cross over, they go to this other phase of the world of reality, and then things start to follow them back. It's a movie, and it's very Hollywood, but in the sense of what we're talking about in terms of the sort of overall implications, it sounds similar. Like there is a way to do it, and we got to learn this. We got to figure this out.
Yeah. Have you guys ever seen the OA?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
That show also delves into near-death experiences and talks about some kind of multiverse that we all live in. It's pretty amazing. You should watch it. It's like 2 seasons only, so you can get some time to watch it. That also talks about that constant. So when someone has a near-death experience, now they can always come back when they die. That's really weird.
Jeffrey Wheeler in the chat says, I know we're over time here, but we'll go for another minute or two real quick just to wrap these comments. Jeffrey Wheeler says, intent is true, But Psi team summons craft, shoots them down, and keeps it secret. This should at least tickle your spidey sense. That's true. He's like, yeah, sending out all our love and light. Oh, here comes the craft. Hit him with the EMP. Spring the Ghostbusters trap. And then you could just see the whatever's on the other side of this. I wonder, like, what does the consciousness on the other end think when we're zapping these crafts with microwave weapons or EMPs?
Yeah.
That's a question.
Oh man, what a
There's
great
too
interview,
much.
man.
There's too much, guys. Any last thoughts before we wrap up for the day? No? Okay. Well, gang, it's been another exciting Friday here at the night shift. This one was a little all over the place, and I apologize for that, but I have to tell you, it's only because that late drop of that interview, it was such a big interview. There's so much to dive into. I encourage all of you to go there, watch it. Reality check with Ross Coulthart, Jake Barber. Watch the full 2 hours and 40-something minutes. It's worth every second. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks to everyone who joined us in the chat today. Thanks for being here. Thanks to all our subscribers. Please don't forget to like and share this video, and we will see you on the next one. Until then, keep looking up.